What if the line between heaven and earth was not as fixed as we've been led to believe? What if divine beings, untouched by human flaws, were capable of making choices that could unravel the very fabric of creation? This is a story of forbidden desires, celestial rebellion, and the catastrophic consequences that followed. It begins in a realm of perfection, where angels served God with unwavering devotion. But even perfection has its limits. Over time, an undeniable pull, a magnetic attraction to humanity, began to stir within them. These celestial beings, glowing with divine light, abandoned their sacred duties and descended to earth, driven by a longing they could no longer suppress. Their arrival changed everything. Radiant and otherworldly, they captivated human women, forging bonds that defied the laws of nature and the will of God. From these unions emerged the Nephilim, giants of unimaginable strength, but devoid of wisdom. Chaos reigned as these colossal beings terrorized humanity, forcing God to cleanse the earth with a flood of biblical proportions. But this was only the beginning. The fallen angels faced imprisonment, their wives transformed into haunting sirens, cursed to echo the temptation that once consumed them. This is more than just a tale. It's a lesson etched into the foundation of existence. Stay with me, and let's uncover the secrets behind this ancient story of love, betrayal, and divine justice. In the beginning, long before the rise of civilizations, before humanity had even begun to grasp the mysteries of the cosmos, there existed a realm untouched by time, a place of perfection, order, and divine purpose. This was heaven, the dwelling place of angels, beings of light whose sole purpose was to serve God. They were radiant, untainted by the imperfections that define our mortal existence. Their days were spent in unwavering devotion, their actions guided solely by the will of the Creator. But even within this flawless domain, something began to stir, something unexpected, something profound. Imagine for a moment what it might feel like to live in such a place, to exist without flaw, without doubt, without desire, beyond the fulfillment of your sacred duty. It sounds idyllic, doesn't it? Yet, as we delve deeper into this story, we begin to see cracks forming in that perfection. Not cracks caused by external forces, but fissures born from within. For though the angels were created to serve, they were also given free will, a gift that carried with it both immense power and inherent risk. And it was this very freedom that would set the stage for one of the most dramatic events in all of creation. At first, the change was subtle, a fleeting glance perhaps, or an unspoken thought that lingered just a moment too long. You see, the angels were not blind to the world below. From their vantage point in the heavens, they could observe humanity, the fragile, imperfect beings who struggled and triumphed, loved and lost, fell and rose again. There was a beauty in this fragility, a rawness that stood in stark contrast to the sterile perfection of heaven. And among these humans, the women caught the eyes of certain angels in ways no one could have anticipated. It wasn't admiration alone, it was attraction, an irresistible pull that defied logic and reason. These women, though mortal and flawed, possessed a depth of emotion and vitality that seemed almost intoxicating to the angels. Perhaps it was their laughter, so full of life. Or maybe it was the way they carried themselves through hardship, with resilience and grace. Whatever it was, it stirred something deep within the angels, something they had never felt before. Desire, longing, curiosity, emotions that, while foreign to them, proved impossible to ignore. As these feelings grew stronger, the angels found themselves torn between two worlds. On one side, stood their divine purpose, their sworn allegiance to God, and the heavenly order they were meant to uphold. On the other side lay the allure of Earth, a place brimming with passion, connection, and experiences they could scarcely comprehend. The conflict must have been agonizing. How does a being of pure light reconcile the call of duty with the whisper of temptation? The answer, as history shows us, came when some chose to follow that whisper. These angels made a decision that would alter the course of existence. They abandoned their celestial home, descending to earth in search of the lives and loves they had come to covet. Imagine the courage, or perhaps the recklessness, it took to make such a choice. Leaving behind everything they had ever known, they traded eternity for a fleeting moment of earthly experience. Their descent was not quiet or unnoticed. As they crossed the boundary between realms, their divine glow illuminated the skies, drawing the attention of those below. Humans gazed upward in awe, witnessing the arrival of beings who seemed more than mortal, yet undeniably present. And so, the stage was set for a collision of worlds, a meeting of the divine and the human that would challenge the very foundations of creation. What drove these angels to take such a monumental step? Was it love, curiosity, or simply the intoxicating pull of forbidden fruit? Whatever the reason, their decision would unleash consequences far greater than they could have imagined. For in crossing that threshold, they set into motion a chain of events that would reshape the destiny of both heaven and earth. As the fallen angels descended to earth, their arrival was nothing short of extraordinary. Imagine, if you will, a world untouched by modernity, a place where humanity lived in harmony with nature, yet still burdened by its primal fears and struggles. The skies above this ancient world were vast and untamed, filled with the mysteries of creation. And then, suddenly, they changed. A radiant light pierced through the heavens, cascading down like liquid gold. It was as though the sun itself had fractured and poured its essence onto the earth below. The air shimmered with an otherworldly energy, and those who witnessed it could do little more than stare in awe. The angels, glowing with divine brilliance, moved among humans as if they were walking dreams. Their presence was both beautiful and terrifying, for they carried with them an aura of power that no mortal could comprehend. Every step they took seemed to resonate with purpose, every glance imbued with a quiet authority. To the women they encountered, these beings were unlike anything they had ever seen or imagined. They exuded a perfection that defied description. Faces sculpted by celestial hands, eyes that held galaxies within them, and voices that carried the weight of eternity. But it wasn't just their appearance that captivated. It was the way they carried themselves, with a grace and confidence that felt almost magnetic. These fallen angels did not merely appear, they charmed. They spoke words that seemed to dance on the wind, weaving stories and promises that stirred the deepest corners of the human soul. Their laughter was infectious, their touch electrifying. For the women who met them, there was no resisting their allure. It was as though the angels had unlocked something hidden deep within their hearts. Desires, dreams, and longings they hadn't even known existed. Each interaction left an indelible mark, pulling the women further under their spell. What began as fascination quickly turned into devotion, and soon bonds were forged that transcended the boundaries of species, time, and even morality. But let us pause for a moment and consider what this truly means. These unions were not simple romances. They were acts of rebellion against the very fabric of creation. In choosing to love these celestial beings, The women were stepping outside the natural order, defying the laws set forth by God Himself. Was it love that drove them? Or was it something darker, a temptation too great to resist? Perhaps it was both. Love has always been a double-edged sword, capable of inspiring greatness while also leading to ruin. And in this case, the consequences would prove catastrophic. The marriages between the fallen angels and human women gave rise to something unprecedented. Children who were neither fully angel nor fully human. These offspring, known as the Nephilim, inherited the strength and size of their celestial fathers, but lacked the wisdom and restraint that might have tempered their immense power. They grew rapidly, towering over ordinary humans, their mere presence casting shadows across entire villages. Their strength was unmatched, their appetites insatiable. To the people of Earth, they were giants, both literal and metaphorical. Yet, despite their physical prowess, they were devoid of compassion. They ruled with brute force, demanding obedience and instilling fear wherever they went. It is here that we see the darker side of the angels' descent. What may have begun as an act of love, or at least desire, quickly spiraled into chaos. The Nephilim became symbols of destruction, their existence a constant reminder of the forbidden unions that had brought them into being. Humanity, once thriving in its simplicity, now found itself living under the shadow of these colossal beings. Fear replaced peace, oppression replaced freedom, and the delicate balance of life was shattered. And yet, amidst all this turmoil, one cannot help but wonder about the emotions that drove these choices. Were the fallen angels aware of the devastation their actions would unleash? Did they believe their love for these women and their desire to experience mortality was worth the cost? Or were they blinded by their own passions, unable to see beyond the immediate gratification of their desires? This chapter of the story serves as a stark reminder of how easily good intentions can lead to unintended consequences. It challenges us to reflect on our own lives and the choices we make when faced with temptation. Are we willing to risk everything for a fleeting moment of fulfillment? Or do we have the wisdom to recognize when something, no matter how alluring, is better left untouched? As the tale unfolds, we are left to grapple with these questions and to brace ourselves for the inevitable reckoning that follows such transgressions. The arrival of the Nephilim marked a turning point in the story of creation, a moment when the delicate harmony of the world was shattered by forces beyond human comprehension. These beings, born from the union of fallen angels and mortal women, were unlike anything the earth had ever seen. Imagine standing before one of them, your neck craning upward as you tried to take in their towering form. Their sheer size alone was enough to inspire terror, but it wasn't just their physical presence that set them apart. The Nephilim carried an aura of raw power, a magnetism that demanded both awe and fear. They were living embodiments of contradiction, part divine, part human, yet wholly alien to the world they inhabited. Their strength was legendary. Stories tell of Nephilim who could uproot trees with ease or crush boulders into dust with their bare hands. They moved through the land like storms, leaving destruction in their wake. Villages that once thrived under the sun became shadows of themselves, their fields scorched, their homes reduced to rubble. Humanity, fragile and vulnerable, found itself at the mercy of these giants. There was no defense against their might, no strategy that could match their overwhelming dominance. For every act of resistance, there was retaliation, swift, brutal, and merciless. It was as though the Nephilim viewed the world not as a home to share, but as a kingdom to conquer. Yet, for all their power, the Nephilim lacked something essential: wisdom. Strength without restraint is a dangerous thing, and this was especially true for these colossal offspring. While they possessed the physical attributes of their celestial fathers, they inherited none of the divine insight or moral compass that might have tempered their actions. Instead, they acted on instinct, driven by impulses that cared little for consequence or compassion. Hunger, greed, and pride ruled them, and their decisions reflected a complete disregard for the lives of others. To the Nephilim, humans were insignificant, mere ants beneath their feet, unworthy of consideration or care. This absence of wisdom made the Nephilim not only terrifying, but also tragic. One cannot help but wonder what might have been if they had been granted even a fraction of the understanding their parents once possessed. Could they have used their immense abilities for good? Might they have become protectors rather than destroyers, guardians of the fragile balance between heaven and earth? Or was their fate sealed from the moment of their conception, destined to embody the chaos born of forbidden unions? The impact of the Nephilim extended far beyond the immediate devastation they caused. Their very existence disrupted the natural order, creating ripples that spread across generations. The balance between predator and prey, between man and nature, was thrown into disarray. Crops failed, rivers ran dry, and animals fled in panic as the giants roamed unchecked. Even the weather seemed to reflect the turmoil, with storms raging more fiercely and seasons shifting unpredictably. It was as though the earth itself rebelled against the unnatural intrusion, struggling to expel the corruption that had taken root. But perhaps the most profound effect of the Nephilim's presence was the way it altered humanity's relationship with the divine. Before their emergence, people had lived in relative harmony with the spiritual realm, guided by faith and reverence for God. Now, however, that connection was strained, even broken. How could one trust in a higher power when the evidence of divine intervention seemed so destructive? The Nephilim served as a grim reminder of the consequences of overstepping boundaries, of the dangers of mixing realms that were never meant to intersect. Faith wavered, replaced by fear and despair. As the years passed, the legend of the Nephilim grew, spreading from village to village, tribe to tribe. Some whispered of their invincibility, while others spoke of their cruelty. Tales of their exploits became cautionary stories, warnings against the perils of ambition and hubris. Yet, despite their fearsome reputation, there were those who dared to dream of challenging the giants. Brave warriors armed with spears and courage took to the battlefield, hoping to reclaim their lands and restore peace. But time and again, they were met with failure. The Nephilim were simply too powerful, too untouchable. And so, humanity endured, clinging to hope amidst the chaos. They prayed for deliverance, for a savior who might rise up and free them from the tyranny of these monstrous beings. Little did they know that salvation would come, but at a cost greater than anyone could have imagined. For the sins of the fathers and the children they created would soon call forth a reckoning unlike any the world had ever seen. The floodwaters loomed on the horizon, carrying with them the promise of renewal and the weight of judgment. But until that day arrived, the Nephilim reigned supreme, their legacy one of terror and ruin etched into the annals of history. As the reign of the Nephilim stretched across the earth, their unchecked power and destructive tendencies pushed humanity to the brink of despair. The once thriving world, teeming with life and possibility, had been transformed into a shadow of its former self. Fields that once yielded bountiful harvests now lay barren, trampled underfoot by the colossal giants. Rivers that once flowed clear and pure were muddied and polluted, their waters diverted or consumed without thought for those who depended on them. Humanity, fragile and vulnerable, struggled to survive in a world increasingly hostile and unforgiving. It was as though the earth itself groaned under the weight of the chaos unleashed by these forbidden beings. God, watching from his divine vantage point, saw the devastation wrought by the Nephilim and the fallen angels who had fathered them. What he witnessed was not just physical destruction, but a profound corruption of the natural order. The harmony he had so carefully crafted between heaven and earth, between humanity and creation, had been shattered. This was no longer the world he had envisioned, a place where his children could flourish and grow in wisdom and grace. Instead, it had become a realm of suffering, fear, and oppression. The Nephilim, with their immense strength and lack of restraint, embodied everything that was wrong with this new reality. They were symbols of excess, arrogance, and the consequences of defying divine law. Yet, God's response was not one of immediate wrath. Before deciding upon the catastrophic flood, he gave humanity, and perhaps even the fallen angels, a chance to repent. There is a quiet poignancy in this moment, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming transgression, there is always an opportunity for redemption. But repentance requires humility, a willingness to acknowledge wrongdoing and seeking forgiveness. And in this case, neither the Nephilim nor their angelic fathers showed any sign of remorse. The fallen angels, bound by their pride and attachment to their earthly lives, refused to return to their celestial duties. The Nephilim, driven by instinct and devoid of moral reflection, continued their rampage without pause. Humanity, caught in the crossfire, could do little more than endure. And so, God made a decision, one that would reshape the course of existence. The flood was not merely an act of punishment, it was an act of renewal. Just as fire purifies metal, so too would water cleanse the earth of its corruption. The floodwaters, rising with unstoppable force, would sweep away the remnants of the old world, washing clean the scars left by the Nephilim and their chaotic legacy. Yet, even in this judgment, there was mercy. Noah, a righteous man who walked with God, was chosen to preserve the future of humanity and the animal kingdom. Through him, a new beginning would emerge, a testament to the enduring hope that even in the darkest moments, life can find a way to persevere. The imagery of the flood is both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Imagine the skies darkening, heavy with clouds that seemed to stretch endlessly across the horizon. Rain began to fall, not gently, as it does to nourish the earth, but in torrents that battered the land with unrelenting fury. Rivers overflowed their banks, swallowing entire villages whole. Mountains, once thought impervious to change, were eroded by the deluge. The sound of the flood must have been deafening, the roar of rushing water, the cries of those caught in its path, the groaning of a planet undergoing transformation. For 40 days and 40 nights, the waters rose, covering every peak and valley, until nothing remained but an endless expanse of water. Amidst this cataclysm, Noah and his family floated safely aboard the ark, surrounded by pairs of animals saved from extinction. Their survival was not just a matter of luck, but a testament to faith and obedience. While the rest of humanity perished, they clung to the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Yet, let us not romanticize their plight. Life aboard the ark was no paradise. Confined within its wooden walls, they faced months of uncertainty The constant rocking of the waves and the haunting knowledge of what lay beneath them, the drowned remnants of a world lost forever. When the waters finally receded and the ark came to rest on Mount Ararat, a new chapter began. The earth, though scarred, was fertile once more. Humanity, starting anew, carried with it the lessons of the past, lessons etched into the collective memory through the trauma of the flood. The Nephilim were gone, their colossal forms buried beneath layers of sediment, their stories reduced to whispers in ancient texts. But their absence left a void, a reminder of what happens when boundaries are crossed and divine laws ignored. The flood serves as a powerful metaphor for the cyclical nature of destruction and renewal. It reminds us that while mistakes can lead to devastation, they also offer opportunities for growth and rebirth. The question remains, will we learn from the past, or are we doomed to repeat it? As the descendants of Noah stepped onto dry land, they faced a choice, one that echoes through time to each of us today. Will we build a better world, or will we allow our own desires and ambitions to bring about another flood? As the floodwaters receded and the earth began to breathe again, a profound silence settled over the ravaged world. The once mighty Nephilim, whose colossal forms had dominated the landscape, were now gone, erased from existence by the cleansing force of God's judgment. Humanity, represented solely by Noah and his family, stood on the threshold of a new beginning. But while the flood marked a fresh start for those who remained, it also sealed the fate of the fallen angels, their punishment as severe and unyielding as the catastrophe they had helped unleash. The fallen angels, who had abandoned their celestial duties to pursue forbidden unions with human women, found themselves stripped of everything they had sought in their rebellion. No longer free to roam the earth or protect the families they had created, they were bound and imprisoned in a realm far removed from both heaven and earth. Imagine the weight of their despair as they realized the full extent of what they had lost. These beings, once radiant with divine light and tasked with serving the Creator, were now confined to darkness, a stark contrast to the freedom they had briefly tasted. Their imprisonment was not merely physical, but spiritual, a severing of their connection to the divine purpose that had once defined them. To understand the depth of their punishment, we must consider what it meant for these angels to be cut off from their former existence. In descending to earth, they had willingly exchanged eternity for mortality, trading the perfection of heaven for the fleeting pleasures of the mortal realm. Yet, even in their fall, they retained fragments of their celestial nature, traces of their power, their luminosity, their ability to inspire awe. Now, those remnants were taken from them. Stripped of their glory, they became shadows of their former selves, trapped in a state of perpetual longing for a world they could no longer touch. Their imprisonment serves as a chilling reminder of the cost of disobedience, a loss so profound that it echoes through time. But their suffering did not end there. Beyond their own confinement, the fallen angels bore witness to the destruction of all they had cherished. The wives they had loved, the children they had fathered, all were swept away in the flood, leaving behind only memories too painful to bear. For beings who had defied divine law in pursuit of earthly attachments, this separation must have been unbearable. They had sacrificed everything for love, or perhaps obsession, and in doing so, ensured its ultimate demise. What greater torment could there be than to know that your choices led not only to your own downfall, but also to the annihilation of those you held dear? This punishment raises profound questions about justice and mercy. Was it fair to hold the fallen angels accountable for the chaos wrought by their offspring? After all, the Nephilim were not entirely of their making. They were products of both angelic and human will. Yet, responsibility cannot be divided so neatly. By choosing to cross the boundaries set before them, the fallen angels set into motion a chain of events that spiraled beyond their control. Their actions demonstrated a failure to recognize the sanctity of limits, a lesson that remains relevant to this day. Every choice carries consequences, often extending far beyond the individual who makes them. The story of the fallen angels also invites us to reflect on the nature of imprisonment itself. While their physical bondage is a clear manifestation of their punishment, one might argue that their true prison lies within. To live eternally with the knowledge of what you have done and what you can never undo is perhaps the cruelest sentence of all. This internal torment mirrors the struggles many face in their own lives when confronted with guilt, regret, or missed opportunities. How do we move forward when our past mistakes seem insurmountable? Can redemption ever truly be achieved? Or are some transgressions beyond forgiveness? For humanity, the fate of the fallen angels serves as both a warning and a mirror. It challenges us to examine our own desires and ambitions, urging us to consider where they might lead if left unchecked. Are we willing to risk everything for fleeting passions, or do we possess the wisdom to honor the boundaries that safeguard harmony? The fallen angel's tragic arc reminds us that even the most powerful among us are vulnerable to overstepping, and that the consequences of such actions can reverberate across generations. Yet, amidst the severity of their punishment, there is also a glimmer of hope. The fact that these angels were not destroyed outright suggests that their potential for redemption has not been entirely extinguished. Though their current state is one of confinement, it is not necessarily permanent. Perhaps in time, they may find a way to atone for their transgressions, to reclaim even a fraction of the grace they once embodied. Until then, their story stands as a sobering testament to the dangers of defiance and the enduring need for balance between aspiration and obedience. The wives of the fallen angels, once ordinary women who had been swept away by the allure of celestial beings, found themselves burdened with a fate as tragic and haunting as that of their angelic lovers. These women, who had dared to dream beyond the confines of their mortal existence, were now cursed to carry the weight of their choices for eternity. Their transformation into sirens was not merely physical, but existential, a metamorphosis that stripped them of their humanity and bound them to a life of eternal suffering. To understand their plight is to peer into the depths of despair, where guilt and longing intertwine in an endless cycle. Imagine, if you will, the moment these women realized their fate. The floodwaters had receded, the world around them was beginning anew, yet they were no longer part of it. Where once they had walked among mortals, sharing in their joys and sorrows, they now existed on the fringes, beautiful yet untouchable, captivating yet deadly. Their voices, once filled with warmth and love, became instruments of destruction, luring unsuspecting souls to their doom. It was as though their very essence had been twisted, their inner turmoil reflected outward in the form of enchanting melodies that masked a sinister intent. Each note they sang carried with it an echo of the temptation that had first led them astray, a cruel reminder of the desires that had cost them everything. What makes the story of these women so profoundly affecting is the duality of their nature. On one hand, They are victims of circumstances beyond their control. They did not choose to fall in love with angels. They were drawn to them, captivated by a force they could neither resist nor fully comprehend. In many ways, their initial attraction was innocent, a natural response to the divine beauty and power of the fallen angels. Yet, on the other hand, they are also complicit in the chaos that followed. By embracing these forbidden unions, they defied the laws set forth by God, knowingly or unknowingly contributing to the unraveling of creation's delicate balance. This tension between innocence and culpability lies at the heart of their tragedy, making them both sympathetic figures and cautionary tales. As sirens, their lives became a paradoxical blend of freedom and imprisonment. No longer bound by the limitations of mortality, they roamed the seas, their ethereal forms gliding effortlessly through the waves. Yet, this newfound immortality came at a terrible price. They were cut off from the world they had once known, unable to connect with others except through deception and manipulation. Every encounter they initiated ended in ruin. Every song they sang a harbinger of death. In this way, their existence mirrored the very temptation that had consumed them, a fleeting moment of beauty followed by inevitable destruction. But perhaps the most poignant aspect of their curse is its cyclical nature. The sirens, once victims of temptation, became embodiments of it, perpetuating the same cycle that had ensnared them. Their songs echoed across the waters, calling out to sailors and travelers, much like the angel's presence had once called to them. It was as though their punishment was not just personal, but symbolic, a reflection of the broader consequences of giving in to forbidden desires. Each soul they lured to its demise served as a testament to the dangers of straying from the path of righteousness, a grim reminder of what happens when boundaries are crossed. This transformation raises profound questions about the nature of guilt and redemption. Can someone truly atone for actions born of love, or at least desire, even if those actions lead to catastrophic outcomes? Or are some transgressions so great that they leave an indelible mark, shaping one's destiny for all time? For the wives of the fallen angels, redemption seems impossibly distant. Their curse is not just a punishment, but a mirror, forcing them to confront the consequences of their choices day after day, century after century. There is no escape, no forgiveness, only the unending echo of their own sins. Yet, amidst the darkness of their fate, there is a glimmer of universality, a thread that connects their story to our own. We too face moments when we must grapple with the consequences of our desires and decisions. Like the sirens, we are often caught between conflicting impulses, the pull of ambition versus the need for restraint, the allure of immediate gratification versus the wisdom of long-term perspective. Their story challenges us to consider how easily we can become trapped in cycles of our own making, repeating patterns of behavior that harm ourselves and others. In the end, the tale of the sirens serves as both a warning and a meditation on the human condition. It reminds us that our choices have far-reaching implications, shaping not only our own lives, but the lives of those around us. It urges us to tread carefully, to resist the siren call of temptation, and to seek balance in all things. For while the sirens may be forever bound to their tragic fate, we still have the power to chart a different course, to learn from their mistakes and strive for a future defined not by regret, but by purpose and meaning. The aftermath of the flood and the transformation of the fallen angels and their wives into bound spirits and sirens marked a profound shift in the fabric of existence. The world that emerged from the waters was not merely a continuation of what had come before, but a new creation, shaped by lessons learned through pain and loss. This rebirth carried with it both hope and caution, a reminder that even in renewal, scars remain. For humanity, for the faithful angels tasked with safeguarding this fragile balance, and for the cursed beings who lingered as echoes of transgression, the story did not end with the receding floodwaters. Instead, it evolved into an ongoing narrative about consequences, vigilance, and the enduring struggle to preserve harmony. For the faithful angels, their role became one of heightened responsibility. No longer could they simply serve God from afar. They were now guardians of a world forever changed by disobedience. Imagine these celestial beings, still radiant with divine light, watching over the earth with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. They bore witness to humanity's tentative steps toward rebuilding, a process fraught with uncertainty and vulnerability. Yet, they also understood that their presence was essential, a bulwark against any future attempts to disrupt the order of creation. Their duty extended beyond mere observation. They actively ensured that boundaries once crossed would never be breached again. This eternal vigilance underscores a truth we often overlook. Freedom thrives only within limits, and without structure, chaos inevitably follows. But what of humanity? Noah and his descendants carried more than just physical tools and seeds into this new era. They bore the weight of memory. The stories of the Nephilim, the fallen angels, and the flood were etched into their collective consciousness, passed down through generations as warnings and teachings. These tales served as moral compasses, guiding humanity away from hubris and excess, while reminding them of their place within the grand design. The floodwaters may have cleansed the earth, but they could not erase the lessons embedded in its soil. Each act of planting, each construction of shelter, each prayer offered to the heavens was imbued with the knowledge that survival depended on balance, between ambition and humility, between innovation and reverence. Yet, the legacy of the sirens loomed large, casting a shadow over humanity's efforts at redemption. These haunting figures, drifting across the seas with their enchanting voices, embodied the lingering threat of temptation. Their songs were not just calls to destruction, but reminders of the seductive power of forbidden desires. To hear a siren's melody was to confront one's own vulnerabilities, to feel the pull of something alluring, yet dangerous. In many ways, the sirens represented the internal battles faced by every individual, the constant tug-of-war between short-term gratification and long-term wisdom. Their existence challenged humanity to remain steadfast, to resist the allure of paths that promised quick fulfillment but led to ruin. This duality, the interplay between guardianship and temptation, serves as the foundation of the post-flood world. It is a dynamic equilibrium where faithfulness and folly coexist, each vying for dominance. The faithful angels stood as sentinels, protecting the integrity of creation, while the sirens symbolized the ever-present risk of deviation. Together, they created a tension that defined the human experience, the perpetual choice between adherence to divine principles and surrender to personal desires. In reflecting on this chapter of the story, we are invited to consider its relevance to our own lives. Are we not all navigating a similar landscape, balancing forces of order and chaos within ourselves? Every decision we make carries echoes of the ancient struggles faced by humanity, the fallen angels, and the sirens. Do we choose restraint, honoring the boundaries that sustain us, Or do we succumb to the intoxicating pull of unchecked ambition? The answers to these questions shape not only our individual destinies, but also the fate of the communities we inhabit. Ultimately, the tale leaves us with a profound sense of accountability. The fallen angels and their wives paid dearly for their transgressions, their punishments serving as stark reminders of the cost of defiance. But their story does not exist solely to warn us. It exists to inspire reflection and growth. We are given the opportunity to learn from their mistakes, to recognize the beauty of harmony and the dangers of disruption. As stewards of our own lives and the world around us, we must ask ourselves, will we honor the lessons of the past, or will we repeat its errors? Let this story resonate within you as a call to action. Engage deeply with its themes, question your assumptions, and seek understanding. For in doing so, you contribute to the preservation of the delicate balance that sustains life. And perhaps, in your efforts, you will find meaning, not just in avoiding missteps, but in actively creating a legacy of purpose, wisdom, and grace. As we reflect on this ancient tale of celestial rebellion and its consequences, it's hard not to feel a sense of awe at the complexity of creation. The story of the fallen angels, their forbidden unions, and the chaos that followed is more than just a myth. It's a mirror held up to our own nature. It challenges us to consider the weight of our choices and the ripple effects they can have on the world around us. Personally, I find myself struck by how timeless this narrative feels. Temptation, desire, and the pursuit of something beyond our reach are threads woven into the human experience. We see echoes of these themes in our own lives, whether in the allure of short-term gratification or the sacrifices we make for love and ambition. The key lesson here is one of balance. The fallen angels remind us that even the most powerful beings are vulnerable to overstepping boundaries. Their story underscores the importance of staying true to our purpose while resisting distractions that may seem appealing, but ultimately lead to destruction. It also teaches us about accountability. Every choice carries consequences, and when we act without considering the greater good, we risk destabilizing not only our lives, but the lives of others. So, what can we take away from this? First, question your assumptions. Are there areas in your life where you've crossed lines you didn't realize were there? Second, engage in thoughtful conversations with those around you. Stories like this one invite us to explore deeper truths about morality, faith, and human nature. Finally, seek knowledge. Dive into ancient texts, myths, or philosophies. There's so much wisdom waiting to be uncovered. Let this story inspire you to live with intention, to honor the delicate balance of existence, and to always strive for understanding. Because in the end, it's not just about avoiding mistakes. It's about learning, growing, and leaving the world better than we found it. What will your legacy be?